Hello my fellow gamers, with 9.2 just around the corner and with a new season, it's time to talk about what I wish I knew when I first started playing Mythic Plus. Keep in mind that these are the things I would tell myself if I could go back in time 2 years ago and have the chance to discuss with my newbie form about what to change or add. With that being said, let's get right into it. Let's start with the elephant in the room, the mentality. I've run numerous keys in Shadowlands Season 1 and 2, and to be completely honest, most of the people that I played with are approaching this specific game mode completely wrong. They only play for score, are too busy preparing their excuse, or blame on someone else as they're never aware of their own mistakes, and probably the worst of them all is the refusal of reflecting what happened for a mistake to happen. I can understand playing for score if you only want to get Keystone Master achievement, but even then, in Mythic Plus you can only get better by playing more, watching others and experimenting. If you refuse to play again a specific key because it doesn't give me score, then you most likely don't enjoy the entirety of the game mode. Playing the same key over and over is not necessarily time lost if you treat it correctly. I can guarantee you that timing 5 plus 18s will prepare you better than refusing to play anything because you can't find that specific plus 20 that you need. Playing is better than not playing. Period. What I want to say is to just play any key that you find, so that when the opportunity for timing a key for score arises, you're already prepared. Take it as training. Sometimes you can't win in something without training, and at one point, you will hit a wall and be forced to train. To continue with my points, another fatal mistake that I see is not being aware of our own mistakes. There are very few World of Warcraft players who are close to playing perfectly the game, and even them could probably pinpoint some mistakes that they already did. But the general population, completely unaware. Everyone does mistakes. Some of them just cost us seconds, minutes, or the big ones, the key. For me, I was also one of those people who thought that at one point played perfectly and it was only my team's fault. If I could go back in time and talk to myself to change this mentality faster, I would say to myself, record your next 3 dungeons and analyze them. I will look back at my older PUGing to Keystone Master series and I will see some mistakes and lack of knowledge that today I cannot see anymore. This was simply because I decided to stop caring about my PUG teams and focus on myself as much as I can. Flaming and blaming others will never get you anywhere, and this is also life advice. Focus on the things that you can change and you will see results eventually. Consistency is weird. It's probably one of the hardest skills someone can learn. Playing at the same level or around the ballpark of that level for a specific amount of time is hard. Really hard. You're not a good player if you destroy a plus 15 DOS and on a plus 16 you die to the first avoidable damage, whatever mental gymnastics you throw at it. This specific skill set can easily be improved by getting good at the fundamentals of Mythic Plus and by playing seriously even if a key is lower than what you usually do. Learning to interrupt, not dying with personal defensives up, knowing mechanics, or simply memorizing the dungeons from top to bottom. This also ties into what I said earlier. By playing lower keys, you can also learn much easier when to use abilities or what damage is worth using a defensive for. Overall, I genuinely think consistency is something every serious Mythic Plus player is striving to achieve. Always try to chase perfection, but never make it your number one goal. When you're gonna play Mythic Plus, you will do a mistake or more. You need to accept this fact, absorb useful feedback, and move on. If you completely whiff a specific ability on your first plus 15 key, that doesn't mean you need to stop there with your Mythic Plus career. So many people are too scared or have a traumatizing experience from a simple mistake that happened. So what? You know it's a mistake, that's the first step. Next time you do a specific dungeon, make a mental note and learn to iron out these issues. I've constantly seen people at the plus 20 to plus 22 range die in the stupidest ways, including myself, and it hasn't stopped them or me from pushing. They get joked upon, but some of them come back stronger just because they have an experience that they want to correct. What I want to say is to just play. Don't care about anyone's opinion of you, but be aware of yourself if it makes sense. A recommendation of people for getting good at Mythic Plus is to also play one role in class. Learning multiple things at once is complicated and might feel overwhelming if you don't know what you're doing. By playing only one character, eventually you'll be able to stop thinking what to use, allowing you to refine the issues in your gameplay. Jumping from character week to week will improve you, but at the start it will improve you much slower than playing one character because you are already too busy fighting to learn your spec and not the things that are necessary to turn the bigger keys. What also ties into the subject is that even by playing an off-meta spec, you can overcome some hardships by being really good at it. Video games are usually unfair when it comes to balance. Some characters, or in our case, specs, are not equipped for the most efficient way to play the game, sadly. When these things start to matter is when you hit the cutting edge barriers of content, where it's clearly obvious, but for lower keys, not at all. For me, I've played Breath of Shaman for a full season and eventually got to a point where I can consider myself above average at the spec, being able to time high-ish keys. This was achievable by simply becoming to some extent second nature to the spec and disconnecting myself from what spell X or Y does and get to the next level as to what I should have used, when to use, and so on. I was thinking if I should include this initially, but I might as well add it in as a small note. PUGing versus Premade is a whole different game. They both teach very useful lessons, and it's a good idea to balance these things. People will often scream to play with a team, and while I also recommend doing it, PUGing will expose you to different routes and different ways to approach a dungeon. Both of these actually teach bad habits for both parts. For example, in a Premade environment, you might always be used for damage cooldowns to be used in a specific part of the dungeon, while in pugs, you might find yourself with DPS who don't have them up, forcing you to make something on the spot. Or in a pug, you might be able to make a better team comp than in Premade, which will result in some dungeons being incredibly easy, and the list goes on. I genuinely think that you as a player should expose to both of them at a constant rate. Just because you had some bad experiences with one of them, that doesn't mean it's always gonna be bad. I'm gonna go as far as to say that if you could combine the skill sets of a pug and a premade, you would actually make a perfect team. But before we go to the next point, keep in mind this: your premade team at one point might have been in that pugging pool of players. For my last point, if you have a goal for Mythic Plus, whatever it is, Keystone Master, Keystone Hero, or the newly added title, you should at least have a schedule as to when to play. Jumping into a key 3 months after your last one is a recipe for disaster. As much as we hate it, to become good at something, you usually have to play it at a consistent rate. This doesn't mean you need to play 24/7, but have a schedule as a rating, for example. Allocate 1 or 2 days of push keys for a few hours, and I can guarantee you will become better and more consistent. It's really hard to play whenever you really want, at long intervals, and maintain a consistent skill. It's just not the human nature to work like that, sadly. People who manage to maintain a very high skill while not playing a lot and very inconsistently are a freak of nature and the exception to the rule. Sure, experience matters, but at the end of the day, your character is controlled by your current form, not by your past achievements. That's it. If you enjoyed the video, it will help me a lot to throw in a like and a subscribe. If you feel I missed something important, you can also remind me by throwing in a comment. Who knows, maybe a part 2 will also be necessary in the future. Thank you for watching, my fellow gamers, and I hope the best of luck in your keys.